Hello everyone, Stuart Lilly here. Let's look at what makes for a good piloting practice. That's what bridge resource management is. It's your good habits and routines, an action plan. What it means to you, what it means to the investigators, and what it means to the bridge teams. So our objective here is to inform you and to equip you with practical skills in managing your resources, trapping errors, and acting decisively. Your objective is to translate it all into your real world practice. So our format is this. We have 5 videos. This review and refresher segment, plus videos that highlight 4 case studies, each covering a casualty investigated by the NTSB. So these accidents get all the attention, of course, right? All the headlines. There's little acknowledgement to pilots for all the thousands of jobs you do that go so smoothly and so glitch-free that no one even noticed. So we have to look objectively at other people's misfortunes because no one really wants to be next year's case study. Life is too short, right? To learn from your own mistakes. We get to learn from those of others. Here's your working definition for bridge resource management for pilots. Well, it's in the name, right? Managing resources. It's a little more than that. So our objective here is to inform you, to equip you with practical skills in managing your resources, in trapping errors, in acting decisively. Your objective is to translate it all into your real world practice. So name your resources on the bridge of a ship. It's people, it's equipment, it's information. All available resources sounds a little like all available means in coal rakes. And consider the BRM training for ships officers. And then your training. What's the difference? Well, theirs is procedures and checklist based. Is BRM a procedure? Well, yes, it is. Just like fatigue management. So for state pilots, consider this a practical action plan. And think of it as armor to wear. Here are the core elements of a good bridge resource management practice for pilots. As we analyze the case studies later, keep asking yourself which of these fundamentals were a factor in each of the accidents. Situation awareness, communications, culture, error detection, risk assessment, decision making, factors, work performance issues, fatigue, fitness for duty. We'll even look at emerging trends later. The big idea here is personal accountability. Your profession demands a lot from you and of your family, and your preparation during this pre-MPIX phase makes the difference in the success of your sustainable pilotage service. Our message is simple here. Before you even get to that first step on the ladder or on the gangway, you are responsible for your fitness and your attitude. So about that right column. Hey, we're all imperfect humans. We strive for the left column. All of your education, training, experience, continual learning, your work ethic, your lifestyle choices lead to a professional piloting practice. This BRM seminar is divided into 3 sections to follow the 3 phases of a typical job. That is before the MPIX, during the MPIX, and after the MPIX when you're piloting. You make transitions from your personal life to piloting life and back multiple times. So let's look at those. How do you prepare for going back on duty? Do you make an effort to switch to work mode? Is it a mindset? What are your habits? Think about the number of jobs you had last week, last month. You work irregular shifts. So what was your sleep pattern? Was it different than last month or last year or 5 years ago? So along with this fitness for duty goes work ethic. A pilot years ago was involved in a collision, was interviewed by the NTSB. They asked him about his work rest cycle, hour by hour, for the preceding 72 hours before the incident. He didn't feel like filling out their worksheet, and all he replied was, "I work when they call me, and I sleep when I'm tired." Seems reasonable and probably nails it for a lot of pilots. As for the cognitive fitness, we have to look at age, willingness to serve. Are you motivated? I think we can all agree that these cognitive skills can degrade when there's fatigue, when there's stress, when there's distractions, and dare I say complacency. Fatigue in general is a given. It's almost predictable. We have circadian highs and lows. The latest phrase from the NTSB is sleep inertia. It describes your physical state, mental state as you emerge from a nap or a long sleep. You're groggy. So the regulators are all over this as an occupational health issue. And there's decades of sleep science from NASA and others that the investigators use. And I'm not saying you're going to be investigated for a collision. You might be a third party. And this is why we look at case studies and why we consider the position of the NTSB, the Coast Guard, and all the science that they rely on to determine how an accident happened and why. Piloting is a shared responsibility. The captain has command of the ship, legal representative for the ship owner. Whenever the con is passed to you, you have navigational control of the ship with the overriding command of the master. And whenever the con is transferred, always state clearly for the VDR. Now, a word about intervention. When was the last time you were challenged on something? Have your orders ever been countermanded? Well, these bridge teams are trained to do so if they see something that is not right to them. They are trained to challenge authority without fear of reprisal. You answer to your state commission as well as to the federal government. The CFR designates pilots as the person directing the movement of the vessel. As such, you have duties to report non-operating equipment. This is normally a verbal notification. It is never done on Coast Guard Form 2692, Notice of Marine Casualty. That is the responsibility of the owner, the agent, the master, or person in charge. The CFR is clear about your duties as the person directing the movement of the vessel. You shall be informed of the draft, the maneuvering characteristics, any peculiarities, any abnormalities about the ship. You must know the current, the tidal state, the predicted set and drift. You shall set a safe speed with consideration for prevailing visibility and weather conditions, for the vessel's tendency to squat and suffer impairment of maneuverability when there's a small UKC, the traffic density, the vessel's wake, the comparative proportions of the vessel and the channel. This exchange of information is mandatory, required by CFR. Besides fixing the vessel's position and confirming orders, making sure the crew is competent, properly manned, they've tested gear, this master pilot information exchange must be conducted. And the key to this is the microphones above you, that it's recorded, that it's real, because that is the first version of the truth that investigators will look at. Yes, it can be supported by pilot cards and your own MPX card. But the key here is to get it on the VDR. You've climbed the ladder at sea or walked to the wheelhouse. You're moments away from greeting the master. This is the second phase. Consider your verbal and non-verbal communications required to meet the captain, exchange the information, orient yourself, and take the con. It takes effort to speak with non-English speaking people. Are your phrases and commands that of maritime English? How about the tone, the pace, and the inflections of your voice? Do you explain yourself well enough for them to comprehend, to get that shared mental model? Well, that maritime English is memorialized in the IMO document titled Standard Marine Communication Phrases. It's a document that's used by investigators worldwide. So when you tell a tug, hey, flop around there and go push-pull aft, or Cap, we're going to have the bulldog on the rumble and do a cow turn off the dock, do you really think he or she understands? A best practice is consistent phrasing and commands to bridge team, to tugs, to your colleagues. With all these cultures coming to your port, you're the first one they meet. Think of those people who greet you at the ladder or the gangway, who escort you to the bridge and through their home. Single nationality, multinational crews. These bridge teams are either a melting pot or a tossed salad. And all this requires tolerance of cultures other than your own. And culture shapes the way everyone expresses themselves. It determines the rules of engagement, the social contract, if you will. Power distance is one of several dimensions to a national culture. So said the industrial psychologist Geert Hofstede when he completed a global assessment of nearly 50,000 IBM employees years ago. Appreciating this dimension is crucial to your performance. You know, it's human nature to have preconceived notions about people from other countries. And what Hofstede discovered was there are inequalities in most countries and cultures. These inequalities create a distance between groups in a society. It's hierarchical. So translate that to bridge of a ship. The vertical command structure, it's a hierarchy. It's the captain's way or the gangway. At least that's how it was pre-ISM code. So this power distance that exists between, say, the unlicensed and the licensed officers on a ship leads to one of two things. It can be a setup for conflict, or you are primed for it and ready to adapt. Power distance is noted as a contributing factor in the El Faro tragedy, for example. It is widely studied and applied by investigators around the world. Take that cultural awareness with you as you walk through the chart room to the wheelhouse. The maid escorting you flings open that curtain, and it's showtime. Yes, piloting is a performance. So besides your technical skills, the soft skills might be that single point in a transit that determines success or otherwise. Take a moment to review these aspects of personality, behavior, Hey, some of you might be thinking, wait a minute, pilots need to be assertive. Why do I have to be so polite? So think about the impressions we make when we meet people for the first time. One extreme example would be that pilot on the Cosco Busan back in 2007 with that Chinese captain. And that captain told the NTSB that pilot had a cold face. So our personal traits and our mental state are on full display. You might have a different voice. You might have a different game face when you're on the bridge. Maybe piloting intensifies your personality. So remember those microphones overhead. And there might be a few video cameras giving the home office a live feed. So no matter who you have on the bridge with you, a pilot commissioner, a port executive, you've got a multinational crew to communicate with and develop a rapport with for your entire transit. And a good rule of thumb, treat them like professionals until they prove otherwise. So you've greeted the captain, made eye contact, a fist bump, a handshake. Captain, welcome. Have you been here before? Pilot, she's 325 and full ahead. Okay, Cap, I got her. Now that might be some pilot's transactions, right? So let's step back a minute. Did something irritate you on the way to the bridge? Was there a bad lee, maybe a flashlight in the eyes as the mate asks you to sign the pilot card and the UKC checklist? What's your attitude at that moment? So consider that third mate escorting you to the bridge. One day, he or she will be a master. And will they be with you or against you? So now take a moment here to think about the dialogue you've had in the last several ships you've done. Remember, the CFR says an exchange of information is mandatory. Draft, maneuvering characteristics, abnormalities, and peculiarities shall be shared. That MPIX is a starting point for investigators. We'll circle back to this in our case studies and in our final review. This MPIX is not just a one and done sort of event. It does not stop until you're off the ship. Since you're communicating with others from different cultures with a different language, might be good to drip feed information to them so that they comprehend 2 or 3 items at a time. You still have to confirm their comprehension. Did you share your mental model? Did they share their mental model, their passage plan? So what is this IMO 8960? That's guidance for the Master Pilot Information Exchange. You can find it on the APA website, as well as a best practices summary for an MPIX. Now, some of you conduct a pilot-to-pilot information exchange, followed by another transfer of the con. Well, no matter who you talk with, think of the 7 C's. There are bridge teams, and then there are bridge teams. Warships, yachts, the cruise industry do things differently. The function-based bridge organization of Carnival Corporation has been around for at least 10 years now. They apply it to both deck and engine. Did they reinvent the wheel? Probably. There's many cruise brands out there that don't prescribe to it. So you may have seen in their bridge team briefings, the ECR is patched in on the intercom, or the chief engineer just comes up and joins in. So these procedural concepts of theirs, such as closing the loop and thinking out loud, demand that you adapt. It doesn't mean everything was so unsafe before they introduced this organization. It just shows how they responded to past casualties. And as for warships and yachts, the simple notion of who has the con gets muddy, doesn't it? Again, verbal confirmation is your best armor. This is what some call the 2+2 cockpit. 2 officers forward, 2 officers aft. And you might hear this: pilot, here is your seat aft. Sit next to the master. This layout is found on 9 of Carnival Corporation's newer vessels across several brands. So some of you will sit, some of you will stand. Where? You have room for your PPU? At least the helmsman is in the center and with an earshot, unlike a few of those ships with the steering stand up in front of the console and the helmsman seated. Where do you fit in? I mentioned emerging trends earlier. One that impacts you is the growth of fleet operations centers. Carnival Corporation operates 3. They're primarily for awareness of real-time shipboard status, staying ahead of the news cycle when passengers post on social media about a bump in the night or a sudden list. It's for weather routing, monitoring fuel consumption. This is data mining on steroids. On the cargo side, there's CMA CGM that operates their navigation and port operations centers, and MSC Cruises running their maritime support center for their cargo ships as well. So they are essentially a third party on the bridge, conducting remote monitoring, remote diagnostics, remote uploading of track lines to the ECDIS. Look, you work in a fishbowl. Think of the thousands of data points uploaded to these centers 24/7, 365. They've been analyzing data for years. They will know more about you and your maneuvering than you do. Phase 3 of your job. Your piloting objective is straightforward here: to maintain positive control of your ship. And you make it happen with situation awareness, with error detection, risk assessment, decision making. It's your code to follow when evaluating problems. That is the essence of operational risk management. Researchers and engineers in the field of human factors study the performance of operators in safety-critical professions like yours. And what makes performance successful is this awareness. We are wired to recognize patterns in our observations. We're spatial thinkers. You are fit and you're rested and you're alert. On the bridge of a ship, your focus is primarily ahead on your route. Your training, your skill, your expertise allows you to anticipate events and act quickly on them. You can pick up abnormal patterns. So here is that cycle of perceiving or sensing and comprehending or thinking and projecting that information and expecting and forecasting. So your brains do this loop constantly. And this is part of your habit, your routine, your ritual to keep things normal. So you seek those patterns that are not so normal. Consider how you scan the outside world and the bridge equipment, how your eyes move, how you receive information, how you process it. So again, this goes back to that personal level of, are you fit? Are you rested? Are you free of all the baggage in your life that you can leave at the gangway or the ladder to focus on your job, so that you are able to comprehend and project and visualize your maneuver? Part of that perception, comprehension, projection cycle fits into this decision loop: orient, observe, decide, act. It's called the OODA loop. You do it 100 times. Originally, it was the creation of a Cold War fighter pilot trying to get inside the head of the enemy and staying one step ahead of them. Well, now it's gone mainstream in the corporate world. We use it in our profession. And with it, you can create a mental model of a successful outcome. Sometimes you make decisions in split seconds. You might have a cruise ship departure. You board the gangway. In those 4 minutes it took to reach the bridge, you find that they've singled up already. You enter the bridge with the captain and staff on the wing, 25 paces away. No hello, how are you? They shout, "Can we go now?" So are you ready for that decision? Think about this operational risk process you loop through. What disrupts it? Number of tasks, your workload, or are you overloaded? Are you multitasking? Or is that just a myth? Maybe it's rapid single tasking. How about distractions? Your attention span has limits, and there are so many distractions on the bridge of a ship. Fatigue. Ever since the Eagle Atomi incident in 2011, fatigue management moved to the front burner for many pilot associations and pilot commissions. There are many ways to mitigate it, besides naps, caffeine, gum chewing, and music playing in the wheelhouse. There are now specified hours on duty, or numbers of turns. Sleep scientists continue to research how to measure it so that ship's crews are actually assessed just prior to watch as to whether they meet a threshold for wakefulness. What are your habits now that you're underway? Your pre-job ritual got you here, a successful exchange of information as well. Developing your routines, good routines early on in your career can only help you when you're at your circadian low at 0200. You rely on your early warning system, your gut, intuition, the voice in your head. Your senses tell you when something is out of place. Your eyeballs are scanning outside, the equipment inside. You're watching that rudder angle indicator every time you give a command. Some pilots use the ticking gyro function on their PPU as another confirmation of the rudder. So you have memory aids. Make mental checklists, even written ones. Talk to the bridge team. Are they engaged? And when it comes to operational risk management and a risk assessment, here's the standard model, the matrix. Risk is a measure of the frequency and consequence of a particular hazard. Practically speaking, it's pilots constantly asking themselves, what if? What if? What might go wrong? How bad and how likely? Can matters be improved? What would it cost? And how much better would it be? What actions should be taken? This goes back to our perception, comprehension, and projection cycle in the OODA loop. Did the pilot on the Golden Ray car carrier in Brunswick, Georgia, see it coming? That was a one-off. No one has pure foresight. There was a Delaware pilot on the tanker Athos 1 who ran over an unforeseen chunk of steel, sliced the hull open and spilled oil. Yet pilots do have to project what you know and observe into a forecast. The lawyers call it foreseeability. Just like the CFR says, you shall set the safe speed according to predicted set and drift. So yes, pilots are held to a higher standard than other mariners. You're experts in local knowledge, you're expert ship handlers. Take that traditional risk assessment matrix and keep it simple. You are risk managers. There's nothing risk-free in your profession. All of your good habits, techniques, and best practices may not keep you from having to engage in evasive maneuvering. You think of the what ifs. You know your bailout points, your commit points. You keep your options open. And when you run out of them, you mitigate the inevitable. And that is man over metal over mud. Back to the personal. What keeps your piloted service sustainable is the sum of all your individual practices, action plans, and attitudes. Look at it from the point of view of the pilot commissioners. They too want a service in which thousands of maneuvers can be reliably performed by pilots on an average day with above average results. Let's pivot now to a review of 4 NTSB briefs and reports. In the final video, which will cover the U.S. flag tanker American Liberty, we'll wrap up with a review and takeaways. We have 3 cargo ships here and a cruise ship. That Norwegian epic occurred in 2019, and you can watch that on YouTube as a prep.